My best friend stole my rich fiancé. 10 years later, at a business retreat, we reunited. She said, "Poor you, still single. Look at my husband. Rich and happy." I replied, "Meet my husband, too." When I called him, my best friend turned pale because my husband was. They say betrayal never comes from your enemies. It always comes from the places you least expect, from the people you'd take a bullet for. For me, it was Arlene. My best friend. My sister. The woman I trusted with every single secret, every victory, and yes, every heartbreak. I don't even remember a time before Arlene. We met in our freshman year of college, two broke girls with oversized dreams, huddled over a shared electric kettle in a dorm room that was always cold. I remember one night, I had a terrible flu, just shivering in my bunk. Arlene walked 2 miles in a blizzard, her face bright red from the cold, just to bring me a cup of soup from the all-night diner. That's who she was to me. We'd stay up until 3 a.m., our hair smelling like the cheap instant ramen we were eating, mapping out our futures on stolen napkins. We were going to conquer the world. We weren't just friends, we were a unit. When my father passed away during our junior year, I couldn't even get out of bed for the funeral. I remember the door to my room opening, and it was Arlene. She hadn't even called. She just drove 6 hours, walked in, and held me while I sobbed. She didn't say a word. She just held me. "It's you and me against the world, Jude," she'd always say, linking her arm with mine. "Always, Arlene," I'd reply, believing it with every fiber of my being. Always. No guy, no job, nothing is ever getting between us. What a fool I was. We were opposites, which is maybe why it worked. Arlene was the bright, shiny one. She was beautiful, ambitious, and could charm a room into silence just by walking into it. I was the quiet one, the planner, the worker. She was the one who pushed me to take risks, and I was the one who made sure we had a soft place to land. After college, we got a tiny, shoebox apartment together. We'd come home from our entry-level jobs, exhausted, and pool our spare change to buy a cheap bottle of wine. We'd sit on the fire escape, looking out over the city, and dream about the day we'd have corner offices. She was my person. My family. Then, when I was 31, and just starting to see real success with my small marketing firm, I met Warren. I met him at a charity gala my firm was helping to sponsor. He was a financial analyst for a major firm, handsome, put together, and disarmingly witty. He was the first man I'd met who didn't seem intimidated by my ambition. He listened when I talked, really listened. He'd remember the little things, like the name of my childhood dog or how I took my coffee. He was stable. He was kind. He was everything I thought I wanted. Our courtship was fast, but it felt right. He was ambitious, like me. We talked about building an empire together, about kids, about a house with a wraparound porch. It was a perfect, beautiful picture, and I was painting myself right into the middle of it. And Arlene? She was my head cheerleader. I wouldn't have had it any other way. "He's perfect, Jude," she gushed after their first meeting, which I'd nervously hosted at our apartment. "He's the one. He adores you, I can see it in his eyes." She became our third wheel, but in a good way. We'd all go out to dinner. She'd help me pick out outfits for my dates with him. She even helped him plan the proposal. I found that out later, of course. She helped him pick out the ring. It happened on a crisp October evening. It was the anniversary of our second date, and Warren had taken me to the botanical gardens. He got down on one knee right as the sun was setting, and the ring, it was a stunning, pear-shaped diamond. It glittered under the park lights, and it was exactly the one I'd pointed out in a magazine to Arlene months before. I said yes before he even finished the question. We went to our favorite Italian restaurant to celebrate, and Arlene was there, waiting at the table, a bottle of champagne already on ice. She jumped up, screaming and hugging me. I'm so happy for you, I could cry, she said, and she was crying, dabbing her eyes with a napkin. I looked across the table, my hand in Warren's, my best friend beaming at me. I had it all. A successful career just starting to take off, a future with a wonderful man, and a best friend who was my rock. I had never, in my entire life, felt so happy or so completely safe. I guess that's always when the floor gives out from under you, isn't it? It all fell apart 6 months later. One cold, rainy March evening. I was in what I called full bridal mode. The venue was booked, the large deposit paid. The caterer was chosen. That night, I was sitting at our dining room table, addressing the thick, cream-colored wedding invitations. My fingers were smudged with ink, and I was humming along to the radio, completely content. Warren was late coming home from work. This wasn't unusual. He was up for a major promotion at his firm, and the hours had been brutal. I'd kept dinner warm for him. When he finally walked in around 9 p.m., I knew something was wrong. The sound of his key in the lock was different. Slower. He didn't call out, "Honey, I'm home," like he always did. He just dropped his briefcase by the door. The sound of it hitting the hardwood floor was loud in the quiet apartment. "Warren? Honey, are you okay?" I asked, getting up from the table, wiping the ink from my hands. "You look pale." He wouldn't look at me. He walked past me, into the living room, and just stared out the window at the rain-slicked street. "Warren, you're scaring me." "Judith, we need to talk." My stomach clenched. That's the sentence that starts every ending, isn't it? The beginning of every nightmare. "Okay," I said, my voice suddenly small. "What's wrong? Is it work? Did you not get the promotion?" He turned around, and his face, it was the face of a stranger. It was agonized and pale, and I'd never seen him look like that. I don't know how to say this. Just say it, Warren. Please. Just tell me. And he did. "It's Arlene." My mind just stopped. It refused to process the words. It didn't make any sense. Arlene? What about her? Did something happen? Is she okay? Did she get in an accident? He shook his head, and a tear actually rolled down his cheek. "No. She's fine. It's me. And Arlene. Judith, I think I'm in love with her." I think I laughed. It was a short, sharp, ugly sound. "What are you talking about? That's not funny." "Arlene? My Arlene? My maid of honor?" "We didn't mean for it to happen," he whispered, and that's when I knew it was true. There it was. The classic line. The ultimate insult. As if it was some accident, like they'd both slipped on a patch of ice and just happened to land in bed together. "How long?" My voice was suddenly cold. All the warmth, all the love, it just evaporated. He flinched. "A few months. It started after the engagement party." "A few months," I repeated. My brain was working fast, piecing it all together. The late nights. The business dinners. The times Arlene had been too busy to get together. So, last week? When she was right here, in this apartment, helping me choose floral arrangements, you were sleeping with her? He didn't answer. He just looked down at his shoes. When she held my bridal shower 2 weeks ago, and gave that beautiful speech about sisterhood, were you sleeping with her then? Silence. When you were working late all last weekend, were you with her? He finally looked at me, his eyes pleading. "Jude, please. It's real. What I feel for her. It just took us both by surprise." "What you felt for me wasn't?" He couldn't answer. And that was the only answer I needed. I walked over to him. My hand was shaking, but my voice was steady. Get out. Judith, let's just talk about this. We can. I don't know. There's nothing to talk about. I pulled the engagement ring off my finger. The beautiful, perfect ring Arlene had helped him pick. It felt disgusting. It felt like it was burning my skin. I didn't throw it at him. I just opened his limp hand and dropped it into his palm. Get your things. And get out of my house. Judith. Now! I screamed. It was the first time I had ever raised my voice to him. He scrambled. He looked terrified. He grabbed his coat, which was still damp, and his briefcase. He fumbled with the doorknob, and then he was gone. The silence he left behind was deafening. It was so quiet. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just sank to the floor, my back against the wall. The invitations were still spread out on the table. A life that, 5 minutes ago, had been real. Now it was all just paper and ink. I sat there for maybe an hour. I don't even know. And then I did the next logical thing. I picked up my phone to call Arlene. I needed to hear her side. I needed her to tell me it was a lie. A sick joke. That Warren was having some kind of mental breakdown. I dialed her number. The number I knew better than my own. Straight to voicemail. Hey, it's Arlene. You know what to do. Her happy, bubbly, treacherous voice. I hung up. I dialed again. Voicemail. And again. Voicemail. That's when I knew. That's when the full betrayal hit me. It wasn't just him. It was her. My sister. My other half. She wasn't just with him. She was hiding. She was hiding from me, with him. They were together, right now, while I was sitting on the floor of our empty apartment. The next day was a blur. I called the venue. I need to cancel the wedding, I said, my voice a monotone. Oh dear, I'm so sorry, the woman cooed. Is everything all right? The wedding is off, I repeated. I lost the entire $20,000 deposit. I called the caterer. The florist. The band. Over and over, I had to listen to their pity. I hated it. I packed up all of Warren's things. I was methodical. I was like a robot. I folded his expensive shirts, I put his toiletries in a box. I found a framed photo on the mantelpiece. It was from a barbecue the previous summer. The three of us. Arlene's arm was around my shoulder, Warren's arm was around my waist. We were all smiling, squinting into the sun. I looked at that photo. At her smiling, lying face. And at his. That's when the rage came. I didn't just tear it up. I grabbed the heavy frame and I smashed it against the wall. Glass shattered everywhere. I swept all those stupid, useless invitations off the table and into a trash bag. I went into the kitchen, found the expensive bottle of whiskey Warren had been saving, and I poured it right down the drain. I spent the next week in a haze. I'd go to work, lock myself in my office, and stare at the screen. I didn't do any work. I just stared. I'd come home, microwave a frozen dinner I couldn't taste, and watch TV without seeing any of it. Mutual friends called. Jude, I heard. Are you okay? I'm fine, I'd lie. Just busy with work. I refused. I refused to give them the satisfaction of knowing they'd broken me. Because that's what they wanted, wasn't it? For me to fall apart, so they could justify what they did. Oh, poor Judith, she was always so fragile. No. Not me. I found a new apartment. A small, sterile one-bedroom across town. It was ugly, with beige carpets, but it was mine. I packed my life into boxes. I threw out half of my things. Anything that reminded me of him. Of her. Every gift she'd ever given me. Every photo. I remember sitting on the floor of my empty old apartment, waiting for the movers, the rooms echoing. The loneliness was a physical weight. It was so quiet. All my plans, my future, my perfect picture, gone. It had all been a lie. But as I sat there, something else settled in. Underneath the pain, underneath the humiliation, there was a tiny, cold spark. Pain, I discovered, is a potent fuel. I channeled every ounce of that heartbreak, every drop of that rage, into the only thing I had left, my work. I made a promise to myself, sitting there on that floor. They took my love. They took my friend. They will not take my future. They will not take my dignity. They will not break me. This wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. The next 10 years were a grind. That's the only word for it. A relentless, soul-consuming grind. I didn't just survive, I decided I was going to thrive. I was left to pick up the pieces, and I was going to build a fortress out of them. A fortress so high, they could never even touch the walls. In the early days, my company was just me and one part-time intern in an office that was barely bigger than a closet. I'm not kidding. It was a rented room in the back of a dentist's office, and it always smelled faintly of mouthwash. I'd get there at 7 a.m. and leave at 10 p.m. I'd stare at spreadsheets for hours, my eyes burning, running on stale coffee and pure, uncut determination. I took every meeting, even the ones I knew were a waste of time. I pitched every client. I learned to network, to be bold, to walk into a room and ask for what I was worth, even when I felt worthless inside. I still have the notepad from that first year. Every single page is filled with names and numbers of potential clients I cold called. Most of them are crossed out. But a few aren't. Those are the ones that built this. Every small win fueled me. Signing a new client. Securing a line of credit from a banker who looked at me like I was a child. Landing a project that was, by all rights, too big for me, and then working 72 hours straight to nail it. All of it reminded me that my future didn't belong to them. It was mine. I moved out of the tiny, ugly apartment. I bought a small condo in a better part of town. It was mine. I signed the papers myself. No one could take it from me. I remember the loneliness of those years. It was a constant companion. I'd come home to my new, quiet condo, microwave a frozen dinner, and eat it standing at my kitchen counter, going over client notes for the next day. I'd fall asleep on the sofa with my laptop still open on my chest. There were moments of weakness. Of course there were. I'm human. Moments I'd see a happy couple walking in the park, holding hands, and feel that sharp, familiar sting. Moments I'd hear a song Arlene and I used to love, that awful 80s pop we'd dance to, and I'd have to pull the car over because I couldn't see the road through my tears. But I never let it stop me. I'd cry for 10 minutes, wipe my face, and get back to work. By the 5th year, my company had exploded. We'd landed a major national account. The dentist's office was a distant memory. I signed a lease on a sleek, beautiful office space on the 20th floor of a downtown building. The kind with floor-to-ceiling glass walls and a panoramic view of the entire city. I hired a real staff. 10, then 20, then 50 people. I gave them benefits, a 401 paid vacation. I was building something real. I remember standing in that empty office before the furniture arrived, just looking out at the city lights. 10 years ago, I was sitting on the floor, addressing wedding invitations, about to lose everything. Now, I was the CEO. My name was on the door. I finally felt like I could breathe. I was no longer poor Judith, the woman who got dumped. I was Judith Evans, founder and CEO. My professional life was soaring. But my personal life, it was quiet. People at work, my new friends, they'd often ask, "Judith, you're amazing. You've built this incredible company. Why aren't you married? You don't even date." I'd laugh it off. "Oh, I'm married to my work," I'd say, which was the acceptable answer. Or, "I just haven't found the right person." But that was a lie. The truth? Trust doesn't come easily anymore. How could it? The man I was going to marry, the man I trusted with my heart, had thrown it away for a shinier model. And the woman I considered my sister, the woman who knew every single one of my secrets, had been the one to twist the knife. Losing them both, in one single blow, it leaves scars. Scars so deep you don't even know they're there until you try to get close to someone again. I tried dating, a few times. A nice lawyer. A kind architect. Men who were, by all accounts, great catches. But I'd flinch when they got too close. I'd find reasons to end it. He was too nice. He was boring. The truth was, I was just terrified. I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. Waiting for the betrayal. So I stopped trying. I decided I was fine on my own. I had my company. I had my beautiful condo. I had a small, tight circle of friends who had proven their loyalty over years. I wasn't lonely. I was just guarded. And then, there were the rumors. About Arlene and Warren. I didn't seek them out. But the world has a way of making sure you hear things you don't want to. I ran into an old college acquaintance at a coffee shop. "Oh my God, Judith Evans? Is that you?" she gushed. After the usual small talk, she said, "Oh, did you hear about Arlene and Warren? They got married, you know." I just smiled and nodded. "Oh, did they?" "Yes. A huge, lavish wedding in the Maldives. Just stunning. They bought this enormous mansion in the suburbs. Warren's climbing the corporate ladder, just got another huge promotion. And Arlene? My goodness. She's a fixture at all the high society charity events. Her picture is in the paper all the time. She runs the biggest fundraiser in the city. Their life sounded perfect. On the surface. Untouchable. "That's nice," I said, stirring my coffee. "Good for them." But as I walked away, I felt that old, familiar ache. Not jealousy. Something else. Pity. I knew something she didn't. I knew what their foundation was built on. You can't build a mansion of happiness on the rubble of betrayal. It doesn't work. It's just a house of cards. I often wondered, late at night, how much of it was just for show. Did Warren feel a pang of guilt when he looked at her? Did Arlene ever, in a quiet moment, compare her life now to the one we were supposed to have as friends? Did she ever miss me? I tried not to dwell on it. I wasn't bitter anymore. At least, that's what I told myself. I focused on what I could control. My work. My legacy. The company I'd built wasn't just a business, it was a testament to resilience. I started a scholarship fund at my old college, a college fund for young women in business who didn't have the resources, women who reminded me of me. I rarely allowed myself to dwell on the past. But as the 10th anniversary of the betrayal approached, I found myself reflecting more than usual. The Judith of 10 years ago would barely recognize the woman I'd become. Back then, I was a young professional with big dreams and a broken heart. Now, I was a respected entrepreneur. 10 years ago, Arlene and Warren took everything from me. Or so I thought. In reality, they gave me the gift of fire. They taught me who I could trust. And more importantly, who I couldn't. They showed me that resilience isn't about avoiding pain. It's about what you do with it. And what I'd done with it. I'd built an empire. One that no betrayal could ever touch. The invitation came on a Tuesday. A completely unremarkable Tuesday. I was at my desk, the one in the corner office with the glass walls, going through quarterly reports. My assistant, Sarah, walked in. Sarah had been with me for 7 years. She was more of a partner than an assistant. She was holding a thick, cream-colored envelope like it was something fragile. "This just arrived by courier," she said, her voice curious. "It's from the Summit of Innovators. And it's addressed personally to you, Judith." I set my pen down. The Summit of Innovators wasn't just any conference. It was the event. An exclusive, week-long retreat reserved for the best and brightest. CEOs, industry leaders, tech pioneers. People whose names held weight in boardrooms around the world. People who were changing the world. I'd always admired the summit from afar. I read about it in business journals. 10 years ago, I couldn't have even dreamed of being on their mailing list. Now, I was one of them. The invitation was embossed with gold lettering. It screamed prestige. I read through the details: a week-long retreat at an exclusive 5-star mountain resort. Access to top-tier networking opportunities. Intimate discussions led by some of the most influential minds in business. But along with the jolt of excitement came a wave of hesitation. These kinds of gatherings, they often felt like a performance. A high school popularity contest for rich adults. People posturing, inflating their successes, flashing their wealth like peacocks in a mating ritual. I wasn't sure I wanted to subject myself to that. I'd spent 10 years building something real, something of substance. I didn't need to perform. I didn't need their validation. "You should go, Judith," Sarah said, as if reading my mind. She smiled. "It's an incredible opportunity. You've earned this. You deserve to be in that room." I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the city view I had earned. "I'll think about it." I weighed the pros and cons for 2 full days. Part of me, the part that was still that wounded woman, the one who was left on the apartment floor, wanted to stay in my bubble. My safe, controlled bubble. Where I was in charge. But the other part of me, the CEO, the woman who had clawed her way up from nothing, she knew this was a chance. A chance to forge connections that could take my company to the next level. A chance to prove, if only to myself, that I truly belonged. On the 3rd day, I walked out of my office. "Sarah," I called out. She looked up from her desk. "Book the flight. I'm going." Little did I know, this decision would lead me straight back into the storm I'd spent a decade avoiding. The resort was as luxurious as the invitation promised. It was nestled high in the mountains, a collection of beautiful modern buildings made of wood and glass, surrounded by breathtaking views. It was a haven of quiet sophistication. Upon arrival, I was greeted by staff who knew my name. "Welcome, Ms. Evans. We have your suite ready. We've already stocked the mini fridge with the sparkling water you prefer." It was impressive, if a little unnerving. The first evening was a casual welcome reception. A chance to mingle before the workshops started. I put on a tailored silk blouse and trousers, something that felt professional but comfortable. I took a deep breath, reminded myself I belonged here just as much as anyone else, and walked into the grand hall. The room was buzzing. A symphony of quiet power and influence. I scanned the faces, recognizing some from the covers of Forbes and Fast Company. I grabbed a glass of champagne, reminded myself to be confident, and started a conversation with a venture capitalist from San Francisco. We were deep in a discussion about emerging markets, and I was actually enjoying myself. I felt confident. I felt good. And that's when I heard it. A voice behind me. A voice I hadn't heard in 10 years, but one that my body recognized before my brain did. A voice that made the blood freeze in my veins. Judith? Is that really you? My heart didn't skip a beat. It stopped. Cold. I closed my eyes for just 1 second. I composed my face. I would not let her see me shake. I turned, slowly. And there they were. Arlene and Warren. My past, staring me in the face. They looked different. Arlene's beauty was still striking, but it was sharper now. It was a high-maintenance beauty. Her dress was designer, probably cost more than my first car, but there was something tired in her eyes that her expensive makeup couldn't hide. Warren had aged, too. He'd put on weight around the middle, and his self-assured smirk looked practiced. The surprise on their faces was almost comical. It was quickly replaced by something else. Something I recognized. Unease. They hadn't expected me to be here. In this circle. In their world. 10 years ago, they had been the ones with the lavish wedding and the mansion. They had written me off as poor Judith, left behind in the dust. I didn't flinch. I didn't gasp. I didn't show any reaction beyond a polite, cool nod. Arlene. Warren, I said evenly. My voice was steady. I was proud of that. It's been a long time. Arlene recovered first. Of course she did. That fake, bright, high society smile snapped into place like a mask. Jude. My goodness. I didn't expect to see you here. The here was emphasized just slightly. As in, here with people like us. Life takes us in unexpected directions, I said, my tone casual. I took a small sip of my champagne. Warren just stared, his drink halfway to his lips. Judith. Wow. You look amazing. Really. Successful. Thank you, Warren. You look, well. For a moment, the three of us just stood there. The weight of 10 years of unspoken history, of betrayal, of pain, hanging heavy between us. Then, as if on cue, Arlene looped her arm through Warren's, pulling him closer, staking her claim. Well, it's just wonderful to see you, she said, her voice a little too loud. We must catch up properly this week. We have so much to tell you. Sure, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. You'll have to excuse me. I was just in the middle of a conversation. I gave them a small nod and turned back to the venture capitalist. As they walked away, Arlene's laugh echoing a little too brightly behind them, I allowed myself a small, private smile. They didn't know it yet. But this week was going to be far more interesting than they'd anticipated. I didn't avoid them for the first 2 days, but I didn't seek them out, either. This retreat was too important for my business to let old ghosts derail my focus. I buried myself in discussions about market trends, I went to workshops on leadership, I networked with people who were doing fascinating things. I was in my element. But fate, it seems, has a twisted sense of humor. It kept pushing us together. It was at a mid-morning panel on innovation in emerging markets when I heard her voice again. Mind if I join you? I looked up from my notes. Arlene. Her smile was bright, but her eyes were searching mine. For what? Validation? Forgiveness? I couldn't tell. It's a free seat, I said casually, gesturing to the empty chair beside me. She sat down, adjusting her tailored blazer, the diamond on her finger catching the light. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We both pretended to watch the panelists. But I could feel her gaze on me. She wasn't here for the panel. She was here for me. Finally, during a lull, she leaned over, her perfume strong. You've done well for yourself, Jude. This little company of yours, it's impressive. Really. The condescension was subtle, but it was there. This little company. As if it was a cute hobby. I said, offering a small smile, not taking the bait. I've worked hard. And you? Oh, you know, she said, waving a hand dismissively, her diamond rings flashing. Life's been so good. Warren and I are just blissfully happy. He's here, too, by the way. He's on the golf course with the bigwigs. He just got another major promotion. His salary must be, well, you can imagine. I just nodded. That's nice. We travel constantly, she continued, as if I hadn't spoken. Europe, Asia. The works. I'm kept busy with my charity work, of course. Running galas, sitting on boards. Well, honestly, it's everything we dreamed of back in the day. She paused, flashing that smug smile. You remember those conversations, right? Sitting on the fire escape, dreaming about living the good life? I guess we both made it. I resisted the urge to point out that her good life was funded by his salary, while mine was built with my own 2 hands, blood, and sweat. I guess we did, I said evenly, turning my attention back to the panel. But Arlene wasn't done. She kept prodding. Weaving in anecdotes about her success, her travels, her perfect marriage. It was almost comical. It was a performance. And I was her intended audience. Here we were, surrounded by some of the most brilliant minds in the industry, and all she could focus on was trying to prove to me that she had one. At lunch, the reunion took another turn. I'd just finished a fascinating conversation with a potential investor from Germany. I was feeling great. I turned from the table, and I saw Warren walking toward me. Alone. He looked awkward. He was polished, in his expensive suit, but he looked hesitant. Judith, he said softly when he reached me. It's been a while. It has, Warren, I replied. Polite, but distant. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You look good. Really. Successful. The company. It's amazing what you've built. Thank you. You, too. For a moment, we just stood there. The silence was heavy. I could feel him searching for the right words. Listen, Jude. He started, then stopped. He ran a hand through his hair. I'm just glad you're doing well. Truly. I am, I nodded. And I hope you are, too. His smile faltered. Just for a second. But he quickly recovered. Yes. Of course. Life's good. Life's great. As he walked away, I noticed something I hadn't seen in him before. A crack. A tiny crack in his confident, master of the universe facade. It was tiny, but it was there. That evening, at the big networking dinner, Arlene cornered me again. This time, Warren was by her side, her hand gripping his arm like a designer handbag. She was in her element, laughing loudly, making sure everyone knew who she was, or rather, who he was. When she finally turned her attention to me, her words were predictably smug. Funny how life works, isn't it? She said, swirling her glass of red wine. Back then, we were just 2 girls with big dreams, sharing ramen. And now, well, look at us. She gestured between the 4 of us, though her eyes were only on me. I met her gaze. Calmly. Yes, I said. Look at us. Her smile flickered. Just for a second. Warren shifted uncomfortably beside her. Whatever they'd expected from this reunion, I had a distinct feeling it wasn't this. It wasn't the calm, successful, and completely unbothered woman standing in front of them. As the night wore on, I realized something important. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need validation. I didn't need them to feel sorry. The simple act of standing here, in this room, breathing this air, thriving, that was enough. They could boast all they wanted. I knew the truth. And deep down, I suspected they did, too. The next morning, I woke with a renewed sense of focus. I was here for business, not for their petty games. I had a breakfast meeting with a tech CEO I admired, and I was excited about it. Yet, the universe seemed intent on throwing them in my path. By now, their attempts to engage me had gone from smug arrogance to a calculated, almost desperate, persistence. Arlene, in particular, seemed to relish every opportunity to flaunt her so-called perfect life. It was like a performance she needed me to watch, to applaud. She needed me to be jealous. It was during an informal networking session over coffee that she made her boldest move. I was standing near the buffet table, which was laden with pastries and fruit, chatting with a fellow entrepreneur, a woman from Austin. We were talking about supply chains. I was completely absorbed. "Good morning." That voice. Arlene. I felt my shoulders tense, but I didn't let it show. I turned. She was there, smiling brightly. Warren trailed slightly behind her, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Mind if we join you?" she said, her voice dripping with false camaraderie. The woman from Austin, sensing an interruption, politely excused herself. "I'll catch you later, Judith." "Of course," I said, turning back to Arlene. I kept my expression neutral. She wasted no time. "You know, it's just so funny running into you here," she began, picking up a croissant she had no intention of eating. "Warren and I were just talking about it last night. How far we've all come. It's impressive, really, what you've achieved." She took a sip of her coffee, her eyes glinting. "Still single, though, right?" The question hung in the air, sharp and pointed. It was designed to cut. I saw Warren flinch, just slightly. He looked at the floor. I smiled faintly. "I'm focused on my work, Arlene." She leaned back, her smirk widening. She thought she had me. Well, I suppose it's easier to focus when you don't have the distractions of family life. All that domestic stuff. It takes a lot of energy. She gestured toward Warren with a theatrical flourish, placing her perfectly manicured hand on his chest. "Speaking of which, look at my husband. Handsome, isn't he? And so successful. That promotion came with a corner office, you know. He's just happy. We're so happy." She turned back to me, her voice dropping to a stage whisper of fake pity. "Poor you, Jude. All this success, and still single at 42. No one to share it with." Her words were meant to sting. To dig into the old wound she assumed was still festering. She thought she was landing the final blow. She thought she was winning. She thought she was looking at the same broken woman she and Warren had left on the apartment floor 10 years ago. What she didn't realize was that those wounds had healed. And the scars were strong. I met her gaze. Unflinching. I let the silence stretch. Just long enough to make her uncomfortable. Her smirk started to waver. She hadn't expected my silence. Then, I said it. Calmly. Confidently. "I'm not single, Arlene." Her eyes widened. Warren looked up, stunned. "Oh," she said, recovering quickly, a dismissive little laugh. "A boyfriend? That's nice. I'm happy for you." I smiled. A real, genuine smile. "No. Not a boyfriend." I let the beat hang in the air. "Meet my husband, too." The words landed like a thunderclap. Arlene's smirk froze. Her face went pale. I could see the blood drain from it. Warren looked equally stunned, his coffee cup faltering on its way to his lips. Your husband?" Arlene stammered. For a moment, the only sound was the murmur of conversations around us, all of them oblivious to the seismic shift that had just occurred. I glanced at my watch, as if the moment was of no great consequence. "Excuse me," I said, my tone as casual as if I were discussing the weather. "I need to make a quick call." He was supposed to be here by now. Leaving them in stunned, frozen silence, I walked away, pulling out my phone. The truth? I wasn't making a call. I didn't need to. My husband was already on his way. He was flying in to join me for the last 2 days of the retreat. But the dramatic pause, it served its purpose. I could feel their eyes on my back as I stepped outside into the cool mountain air. The tension between them was almost palpable. I took a deep breath. And I smiled. I returned a few minutes later, composed and collected. The room had shifted. Arlene and Warren were still standing in the same spot, not talking, just frozen. As I rejoined the room, the main doors of the hall opened. And my husband entered. Howard. Howard has a way of commanding attention without demanding it. He's not flashy. He's solid. He's tall, and he carries himself with a quiet confidence that's magnetic. He's the warmest, kindest man I've ever known, but he's also one of the most brilliant. He's elegance personified. His entrance was like the opening act of a symphony. He paused at the door, scanning the room. People whispered his name. Recognition sparked like wildfire. Is that Howard Sterling? The Howard Sterling? From Sterling Tech? What's he doing here? He wasn't just my husband. He was a force in his own right. A titan in the tech industry. A leader whose accomplishments had set new benchmarks. A name that everyone in that room, including Arlene and Warren, knew and respected. Arlene's expression was priceless. Her confident facade just crumbled. Her mouth was slightly agape. Warren looked like he'd seen a ghost. Howard spotted me. His entire face lit up with that warm, genuine smile that always made me feel safe. He walked over to me, ignoring the stares. I walked to meet him, taking his hand with a quiet pride. He leaned in and kissed me, soft and real. "Everything okay, honey?" he asked softly, just for me. "Your flight was good?" "Perfect," I replied, squeezing his hand. I turned back to the room, but my eyes were on Arlene. "Everyone," I said, my voice carrying just enough authority to cut through the murmurs. "This is my husband, Howard." The room erupted in applause. Though, it wasn't for me. It was for him. People started moving toward us, eager to shake his hand, to introduce themselves. Arlene and Warren just stood there, clapping mechanically, their smiles frozen and forced. I could see the wheels turning in Arlene's mind, trying to reconcile the woman she thought she'd left behind, poor, single, broken Judith, with the woman standing before her now, holding the hand of Howard Sterling. As the applause died down, I caught Warren's eye. He looked away. First. For the rest of the day, their bravado was gone. Arlene didn't approach me again. Warren avoided even glancing in my direction. The tables had turned. And they both knew it. That night, as Howard and I shared a quiet dinner on the terrace of our suite, I reflected on the moment. 10 years ago, they had taken something from me I thought I couldn't live without. But in doing so, they'd given me the fire to build a life far greater than anything they could imagine. And now I was free of them. Truly free. Watching Howard move through the crowd was, well, it was something. He was gracious, he was warm, he remembered names. People were drawn to him. And I was the woman standing proudly by his side. Arlene and Warren were still standing near the buffet table, looking completely lost. Their earlier confidence had evaporated, leaving behind two very confused, very small-looking people. I made my way toward them, Howard catching my eye as I approached. His smile was subtle but knowing. He'd pieced together the situation long before I reached him. He knew exactly who they were. I had told him my story, all of it, years ago. "Arlene," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I'd like you to meet someone." Arlene turned, and the color drained from her face as Howard stepped forward, his hand extended. Warren, standing beside her, seemed frozen in place. Howard, ever the gentleman, didn't wait for them. "Hello," he said, his tone warm but unmistakably authoritative. "I'm Howard. You must be Arlene. And you're Warren." Arlene took his hand mechanically. Her smile was stiff, faltering. "Howard. Howard Sterling. It's an honor. I've read all about your work." Warren just nodded, speechless, and shook Howard's hand. "It's always nice to meet Judith's old friends," Howard said smoothly, slipping his arm around my waist, pulling me close. "She's told me so much about her past. It's always nice to finally put faces to the names." The subtle jab, the echo of my words, wasn't lost on Arlene. Her cheeks flushed faintly. "Yes," Warren finally managed, his voice strained. We were just saying how impressive Judith's accomplishments are. What she's built." Howard smiled, his eyes fixed on me, and the love in that look was so real, so tangible, it warmed me from the inside out. "She's incredible, isn't she? The way she built her company from the ground up, with nothing but her own integrity and grit. I'm the lucky one. I tell her that every day." Arlene's polite, frozen smile wavered. "This wasn't just my husband. This was my partner. My champion. This was a man who saw me, and loved me, and wasn't afraid to say it in front of anyone." It was the complete opposite of what Warren had been, and it was the complete opposite of the accessory Arlene had treated him as all weak. The irony wasn't lost on me. 10 years ago, Arlene had stolen what she thought was the pinnacle of my happiness, a man with a good salary and a promising future. Now, standing before her was the man who not only eclipsed everything Warren had been to me, but who also symbolized the life I'd built in the aftermath of their betrayal. It wasn't just Howard's presence that stunned them. It was what he represented. His achievements, his influence, his undeniable stature. He was everything they had pretended to be, but weren't. As the conversation continued, I noticed the shift in their demeanor. Gone was the arrogance. In its place was a nervous energy, a palpable discomfort they couldn't mask. When the conversation finally, blessedly, came to a close, Howard excused himself to speak with another attendee, leaving me alone with them. For a moment, none of us spoke. The silence was heavy. Arlene began, her voice trailing off. "Impressive." "He is," I smiled faintly, meeting her gaze. Warren's expression was harder to read. You've done well for yourself, Judith," he said, his tone lacking its earlier conviction. "I have," I replied simply. "And I'm grateful for every step of the journey that brought me here." The words weren't meant to sting, but I knew they did. They carried a weight that couldn't be ignored. A reminder that the life they thought they'd destroyed had only grown stronger in their absence. If you're still listening, please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 down below. It lets me know that you are amazing, and it helps me know you've been on this whole journey with me. Your support is a huge encouragement and means the world to me. Please comment that number 1 so I can see you, and now, let's get back to the story. The next day brought a noticeable shift in the air. The smug superiority, the constant flaunting, it was all gone. Replaced by an awkwardness that made every encounter feel strange. I didn't seek them out. I didn't need to. The truth of the situation had sunk in, and I was content to let them sit with it. Howard and I attended a panel on renewable energy together, our hands linked. I felt whole. It was during a networking brunch that they made their next move. I was speaking with a group of entrepreneurs about potential collaborations, and I was feeling energized. I caught sight of them approaching. Not with a swagger, but hesitantly. Arlene's smile was polite, almost shy. An expression I'd never seen on her. "Excuse me," Arlene said, her voice smoother than it had been. "Mind if I steal Judith for a moment?" The group nodded, and I followed them to a quieter corner of the room. Warren trailed behind her, his hands stuffed awkwardly into his pockets. He wouldn't look at me. For a moment, none of us spoke. Arlene shifted her weight. "I just wanted to say," she began, her tone careful, "that it's impressive. What you've built. Who you've become." I raised an eyebrow, unsure of where this was going. "Thank you." She nodded, her gaze flickering to Warren, who was staring at the floor. "Look. I know things between us didn't end well." I almost laughed at the understatement. "You could say that, Arlene." She winced, as though the memory physically pained her. "We were young. Stupid. And I made choices I'm not proud of." The admission hung in the air, heavy and unexpected. Warren finally looked up. His expression was defeated. "I've been thinking about it a lot since yesterday. Seeing you here, seeing what you've accomplished. And seeing your husband." He swallowed. It's made me realize some things. About myself. About the kind of man I've been." He took a deep breath, his eyes meeting mine with a sincerity I hadn't seen in 10 years. "I'm sorry, Jude," he said. "For everything." Arlene quickly added, her voice quiet, "I'm sorry, too. Truly. More than you know." The words were simple, but they carried a weight I hadn't expected. For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. Part of me, the old, wounded part, the girl on the apartment floor, wanted to hold on to the anger. Wanted to scream at them. But another part, a quieter, steadier part, the woman I had become, recognized the value of letting it go. "I appreciate that," I said, my voice measured but not unkind. "But you don't owe me an apology. What's done is done. And honestly, I'm better for it." Warren nodded, his expression a mixture of relief and regret. Arlene finally spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. We didn't think you'd move on like this. We thought. You thought I'd fall apart," I finished for her. "And maybe I did, for a while. But life has a funny way of proving people wrong." She nodded, finally meeting my gaze. There were tears in her eyes. "We just wanted to say that," Warren said, seeming to find his voice. To clear the air." "Consider it cleared," I said. I offered them a small, genuine smile. The conversation ended there. But the impact lingered. For the rest of the day, I caught them watching me and Howard, their expressions unreadable. It wasn't anger or envy anymore. It was reflection. Perhaps even regret. That evening, as Howard and I attended a dinner hosted by one of the summit's organizers, I felt something I hadn't felt in 10 years. Closure. Their apology, as unexpected as it was, had given me the final piece I needed to put the past behind me. I didn't hate them anymore. I didn't pity them either. I simply saw them for what they were, flawed people who'd made terrible mistakes and were now grappling with the consequences. As Howard and I left the dinner, I took his hand, grateful for the life we'd built. The past no longer had any power over me. The cracks in Arlene and Warren's perfect image were no longer subtle by the third day. They were impossible to ignore. Now that my attention wasn't focused on my own pain, I could see theirs. It wasn't just their subdued demeanor. It was the little things. The slip-ups that revealed a truth they couldn't hide. It started that morning, during a panel discussion on maintaining balance in high-pressure industries. I sat a few rows behind them, next to Howard. Warren, who had always prided himself on being a picture of composure, was fidgeting. He was checking his phone under the table every 30 seconds. His attention was elsewhere. Arlene leaned in to whisper something to him, but he shook his head, brushing her off impatiently. The tension between them was so thick, I could feel it from 3 rows back. During the coffee break, I found myself near enough to catch fragments of their conversation. They were huddled in a corner, and Arlene's voice was low but sharp, her words carrying the weight of frustration. "This isn't working, Warren," she said, her back to me. "You said things would get better after the merger." "They will," he snapped back, his tone curt. "I just need time. These things are complicated." "Time?" she scoffed. "We're running out of that. The bank is calling, Warren." "The bank?" "About the house." The exchange ended abruptly when they noticed me nearby. Arlene forced a smile, though her eyes betrayed the strain. Warren gave me a terse nod, his jaw tight. I didn't press. Their unraveling wasn't my concern. But it was hard to ignore how different they seemed from the polished, invincible couple they had once projected. Later that afternoon, I overheard more. This time it was Arlene, speaking to a mutual acquaintance during a networking session. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but her voice carried across the room, the bitterness in her tone unmistakable. "He's lost his touch," she said, her words clipped. "The deals aren't coming in like they used to. That last merger, it was a disaster. It's all tied up. And the pressure, it's suffocating. His lawyers are practically living at our house. I've tried to help, but he won't listen. He's too proud." The acquaintance responded with polite murmurs, clearly uncomfortable. Hearing this, it didn't bring me the satisfaction I might have expected. A decade ago, I might have reveled in their struggles, seen it as karmic justice for what they'd done to me. But now, it just felt hollow. Sad. Their problems were their own. I had no interest in gloating. The facade they'd so carefully maintained was crumbling. The difference was, I had rebuilt myself. I had turned my fractures into strength. They, it seemed, were still trying to hold their broken pieces together with the thinnest veneer of perfection. That evening, I crossed paths with Arlene again. She was standing alone on the terrace, a glass of wine in her hand, staring out at the mountains. She looked small. Before I could leave, she turned and saw me. "Hi," she said, her voice softer than it had been earlier. "Hi, Arlene," I replied, nodding lightly. For a moment, she said nothing. Then, as if she couldn't stop herself, she spoke. "You've done well for yourself, Jude." "Really well." "I have," I said simply. She nodded, taking a sip of her wine. I used to think we made the right choice. Warren and I. That I. Her voice trailed off, and she shook her head. But seeing you here. Seeing the life you've built. Seeing your husband, how he looks at you. She gave a bitter little laugh. It's clear we didn't just lose you, Judith. We lost ourselves, too. I didn't know what to say to that. The Arlene I remembered would never have admitted such a thing. She had been so sure of herself, so confident in her choices. "I don't know what to tell you, Arlene," I said finally. "Life gives us what we put into it. I've worked hard for everything I have. And I'm grateful for where I am." "You should be," she said, her expression pained. "You deserve it." With that, she walked away, leaving me alone on the terrace. When I returned to my room that night, Howard was waiting for me. I told him about the conversation. He listened patiently, his hand resting lightly on mine, grounding me. "You don't owe them anything, Jude," he said softly. "Not an explanation. Not forgiveness. You've moved on. Let them figure out their own path." He was right, of course. Their struggles weren't my burden to bear. I'd let them go years ago. The final day of the retreat was dedicated to personal growth and reflection. The keynote speech was reserved for one of the participants. I'd been asked a week prior to deliver it. As I stood backstage, I glanced at the audience filing into the grand hall. Industry leaders, innovators, influencers, and among them, Arlene and Warren. They were seated near the middle. Arlene's posture was tense, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Warren was quieter than I'd ever seen him, his usual confidence completely absent. I stepped onto the stage to a round of applause. The spotlight was warm on my face. Taking a deep breath, I began. "When I started my journey," I said, my voice clear and strong, "I believed success was about reaching a destination. Wealth. Status. Recognition. I thought those things would make me whole. I thought they'd fill whatever voids life had created. But I was wrong." The room was silent. Every eye was on me. 10 years ago, I faced one of the greatest betrayals of my life. I didn't look at them, but I could feel their gaze. It broke me. In ways I didn't think I could recover from. It came from people I trusted with my life. But that pain became my catalyst. It forced me to confront who I was, and who I wanted to become. And in doing so, I discovered something far more valuable than success. I paused, scanning the room. Warren shifted in his seat, his gaze fixed on me. Arlene's expression was a mix of guilt and something I couldn't quite place. I discovered the value of integrity, I continued. Of resilience. Of surrounding myself with people who lift me up, rather than tear me down. The success I've built isn't just mine. It's a reflection of the people who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. It's a testament to the power of community, of trust, and of authenticity. The applause that followed was humbling. But I wasn't done. "But this journey," I said, "hasn't just been about professional growth. It's been about letting go. Letting go of resentment. Of anger. Of the past. Because holding on to those things only holds you back. It doesn't hurt them. It only hurts you." And I learned that real success isn't about what you achieve. It's not about the car, or the house, or the title. It's about who you become along the way. It's about finding a life that is authentic, and a love that is real. When I finished, the room erupted in a standing ovation. As I returned to my seat, Howard squeezed my hand, his eyes shining with pride. Later that evening, as the retreat drew to a close, I found myself face to face with them one last time. They approached me hesitantly. "That was..." Warren began, his voice trailing off. "That was powerful, Judith." Arlene nodded, her eyes glossy. You've really grown." I didn't realize how much." I'm so sorry. For everything we put you through." For a moment, I considered their words. 10 years ago, I would have given anything to hear that apology. But now, they felt like a footnote. "I appreciate that," I said simply. "But the past is the past. We all make choices, and we all live with them. What matters is what we do moving forward." They nodded, their expressions a mix of relief and regret. As they walked away, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The anger, the resentment, it was all gone. In its place was a quiet peace. That night, as Howard and I shared a quiet moment under the stars on our terrace, I reflected on the journey. The betrayal that had once defined me was now just a chapter in a much larger story. "You're quiet," Howard said, his voice soft. Just thinking, I replied, my gaze on the horizon. About how far we've come. He smiled, his hand finding mine. And how far we'll go. I nodded, the future stretching out before us, limitless and full of possibility. For the first time in a long, long time, I felt truly at peace. Life has a way of balancing the scales. Call it karma, call it fate. Or simply call it the result of hard work and perseverance. Whatever it was, I knew this much, it was mine. Thank you all so much for listening to my story. It really means more than you know. If you've ever felt betrayed, if you've ever had to rebuild your life from the ashes, please know that you are not alone, and it does get better. If this story resonated with you, I'd be so grateful if you'd like the video and maybe share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And please, leave a comment below. I read every single one. Thank you for being here.